Alright, so I'm going to walk you through the process of kind of getting this all into Maya, setting up your render setup, and then next week we can start going into Substance with it. But this week will be a lot of laying out UVs, blocking in your materials, that type of stuff. As far as edge flow, I am seeing a couple issues like the star junction up here. These should be more radial loops straight around. So in the end, we might go back and clean some of this up before you put it on your final demo reel, but I'd rather spend the majority of the time texturing this month. So the first thing I would do is under your subtools, go to merge and merge down and just hit OK. And actually let's just merge visible. Doesn't want to do that. So just click always and just click through and merge all this down. So that way we can export it all as one. Cool. Once we have it all as one, just go to export, and we're going to export as an OBJ. You should already have a Maya project set up, and just let's do this in case you kind of forgot how to do Maya projects. Let's just go into Maya 2018. That's what I would suggest that you use is 2018.2. If you have 2017, I know you're in between moves. That's fine. We can use 2017. You will need RenderMan installed. So I'm going to go File, Project Window. And this catches up. Cool. So all this is fine. You're just going to go New, give it a name. Never have spaces in it, so if you want to use a space, use an underscore or use camel case. This can come back to haunt us kind of later on if there's any spacing in your naming conventions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit accept, and then jump back into ZBrush, and I'm going to export. I'm going to find that frog archer, and I like to, in my data folder, put any of my OBJs going back and forth. So just call this frog final, and we'll save it. And for now, that's all we should have to do in ZBrush. We'll be getting probably displacement maps and stuff from it later on. But now we'll jump back into Maya, and we'll go to File, Import, and go to your options. And instead of best guess, go to OBJ and turn on single objects, and go to import and grab that frog final. If that's not showing up, go to your plugin manager, and I forget, either OBJ export or imports a plugin. So look for OBJ, it's the export. So you'll be fine on import. Alright, so now grab this guy, and he should be one piece, and we want him to be at the origin, so I'm going to move him up, and we want him to be about the size he'll be. So this is, my units are in centimeters, and that's what it'll default to. So I'm going to hold down D and V, actually D and X, and I'm going to grid snap that to the bottom. So D and X allows me to move the center pivot. I'm then going to scale this up, and you figure out how big you want them. I'm not going to make them full human size, but think about how big you would be in real world units, because everything as far as RenderMan rendering, and if we need to add any XGen to this, I know you mentioned it for the arrows, we would need to make sure he is at the real scale, right? So I'm going to scale them about this high. All these groups down here we don't need. That's just garbage that comes over from ZBrush, so we'll delete that. This now we're going to grab and go mesh, separate. And then I'm going to call this geo, So that's all my geometry. And then you go through each one of these and name them. So that's his body. That's the quiver. Oops. So I'm not going to go through all these, but when I'm getting your scene, or when you're passing your scene off to other people, all this stuff, right? So that would kind of be your next step, is to make sure that everything's named. Now I want to set up my kind of look development, my render cam for this stuff. I'm just going to grab all the geometry first and go to surfaces, sorry, mesh display, and I want to soften edge. So we can do this, and we can hit the 3 key on everything. The 3 key, sorry about that. The 3 key doesn't necessarily work with RenderMan, so I'll show you kind of what we have to do. Right. So now everything's a little bit smoother, so we're probably fine not hitting the 3 key. I'm going to go Panels, Perspective, New, and let's go to my channel box, and this is my render cam. So let's go ahead and name that render cam, and you can see we're in it down here. So now I want to kind of frame this guy for my renders. Your final renders for your reel will be in an HD format. So, but the aspect ratio I like to do for kind of testing my materials and stuff would be something that just frames me nicely, right? So I'm going to go to View, Camera Settings, and I'm going to turn on my resolution gate, and this shows me the resolution I'm at. Now I'm going to go to my render settings, and under here, under common, for the render cam 2, we're going to go, let's say, width of 1,000 and height of 2,000. Cool. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is go back under View, Camera Settings, and click Vertical or Fill. Vertical just makes sure that I can see the whole framing of the camera. So this isn't necessarily going to work for me. So I'm going to pick here, and then I'm going to go back to my render settings, and let's change the width to 1500. Nope. Let's do 2000. Let's do, so your guy's wider than he is tall, it looks like. Let's do 2200. Cool. So this just, all the pixels I'm using is to render him. The next thing I'm going to do is set up some bookmarks here. So I'm going to go to Edit Bookmarks, and we'll call this Front. And now I'm going to rotate him a bit. 3/4. And then looks like the front I overwrote, so I'm going to go front, new bookmark, there we go. And new bookmark, and let's just do a side. Yeah, I named it wrong, but you can name them right. This is just going to give us a quick way to go to bookmarks, 3/4. Looks like they're set up wrong. Bookmarks, front. Bookmarks, 3/4. Let's go ahead and edit this bookmark. Bookmarks, edit bookmarks. Okay, we could delete it, and I'm not going to deal with that, but just have those set up so you can kind of jump through them quickly. Now I'm going to go ahead and render this first. Something just happened. Let me close that again and let's kick off a new render. So we can zoom out, and I can just left mouse button to move this around. Okay. So this is bad lighting, and we don't have any RenderMan materials on here, so that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to go ahead and every one of these objects, you're going to want to add a RenderMan layered material to. So I'm going to go to New Material. And for every one of these, you're going to go under RenderMan, Materials, and Pixar Layer Surface. So we'll go, and you'll go through each one of those and add it, and then you'll want to name each one of those. So if you go to your attribute editor, this Pixar Layer Surface 1, I'm going to call it Body. We can call it Body Material, so it's not named the same as the Geo. And then we'd go through each one of those. Inside the actual layers, go to the Layer Mixer and turn off Layer 1. So the base layer is going to be a skin. If we want to add dirt, mud, paint, anything like that, we can now start adding layers on top of that. Okay? So you'll go through and you'll add one of these for each and go through the same steps that I just shown. And we're going to get to those inside of the hypershape later so we can edit them. So the next thing we're going to do after you completed all that is go to select the camera. And that little icon I just clicked in the top window is what you should go to. Scroll down in the attribute editor to environment, select background color, and put the value to 0.5. That's going to give you 50% gray, so we're going to go for a nice even lighting across him. And it'll just help our eyes so that it don't color or calibrate to black or even like a white if you had a white background. So you want neutral, which is 50% gray. For our lighting in this scene, do not have anything selected and go to this icon up here. You can double click it. If it doesn't pop open, look for RenderMan preset browser up top. Go to outdoor environment maps and pick one of these three. I would do probably Luxo Junior or Griffith. This is more midday sky. This is a little bit like early morning or late afternoon. And then from the top view, I'd zoom out, select this guy, go to rotate, and rotate it till the sunlight is coming across the front of your character at a 45-degree angle. And once you have that, let's render it again. Oh, must have hit spacebar in there. So now you can see we have a nice even lighting to them. Our eyes aren't color calibrating to the back. This is the only material that's a Pixar material, which is properly reacting to the light, so we don't want to add everything else. The last thing I'd like you to add for the lighting setup is you're going to create two spheres. So create polygon primitive sphere. And you can move these wherever you want, like top corner, bottom corner. Scale it up to about here. Let's move it to the top. Control V, I'm going to duplicate it and move it to the side. And on this guy, we're going to go to Materials, Metal, and look for the chrome. Right-click, import and assign to selected. And then this guy, we just want a 50% gray Pixar material, so I'm going to right-click, go to Assign New Material, and I'm going to go Materials, and this one I'm just putting a Pixar surface on. And in the Attribute Editor, under that Pixar surface, I want to make sure this color is 50% gray. So I'm going to go 0.5 on the value. So now when we render this, I'm going to hit Escape to cancel this render right here, and hit R to render again. Again. So now this shows us our exact lighting, so we can see what direction the lights are coming from in the scene. We can see the intensity of the light in the scene, so this helps us to understand how it should look compared to the background. And this will always remain 50% gray, flat shaded with no specular on it, so anything that's diffused on here, we can understand if we're having too much specularity, too little specularity. It just helps us to judge what our environment should be. So I like having these guys in the scene as I'm building out my materials. And then from here, I would actually start blocking in my materials. So at least for the skin, the other materials we can use substance to block in, which you probably won't get to that this weekend because you'll need to lay out all your UVs yet too. So let me know if you're unsure of the UVs. So I'm going to go to the material here. And don't forget about the hypershade, so you can access those materials through the hypershade as well. So you'll see a lot more of them because you'll have one for every object out there. For the arrows, you can have one that encompasses all the arrows if you'd like. So whatever has like a UV set to it, I kind of think of it that way, is you should have a material for it. Alright, so inside here, I'm going to go to the body material, and I'm going to map input-output connections. And this is what the layering system looks like. So this is the mixer, which if we go in here, this is the one that we turned off the layer 1. So you see we disabled it. So we're dealing with this one, which is your base layer. Right? So on your base layer, we are going to go to diffuse, and we're going to click off the enable. We're going to go to subsurface, enable it, turn the gain to 1, and pick the base color that your frog is going to be. So use that color. Go to single scatter, enable, 100%, turn your color to, again, whatever the color your frog is going to be, right? And then this is the first thing we're going to adjust, is this distance, and that's the depth that the light can go through your character. In order to see this really well through the small spots like the fingers, we'll want to slightly backlight this character. So let's cancel this render, and let's just close out for now so we can get all the performance back inside of Maya. So the last part of this light setup is, let's create a rectangular light, which is what I have here. So I'm going to hit T, which allows me to focus it. So I'm going to grab this guy and just focus it on the middle of the character. Bring this back here. Scale it up about the size of my character. Move it a little bit further away from them. Go back to my bookmark. Click the recorder, which is technically my front. And then for this, enable temperature. And because it's a backlight, I like something bluer, so let's go with 12,000, which is going to be a slightly blue color. And let's go with 4 for the initial exposure. And now we'll render this. And he should have a green subsurface material on him. Once the render opens up. And that should open on its own. If you ever need to bring it to the front, just click the icon in the dock. Alright, so now we have a green shader with subsurface. This will start kind of rendering out, but we have no way to really look at what is what on here, which makes it hard for us to be objective, right? So I'm going to go into my render settings. We'll just let this go on the side here. And go to your passes. We're going to enable a couple passes here that'll help us to discern what's going on. So I'm going to scroll down, and I want an albedo pass, so I'm going to double click that. That's my pure color. I want shadow. I want direct specular. And I want subsurface lobe and transmissive single scatter lobe, which is right below it. These are the first passes that I'll need to work with. So from here, I'm going to kill this render by hitting escape, and then I'm going to hit R again, and that'll kick off the render. Also notice up here the little bit of rim light that's been added in, so we know that that rim light's coming from behind, and we know about its intensity on the character by looking at these spheres. So on the left here, notice that there's an arrow now next to this entitled frame. If you double click it, we can now look at this. These are the pure colors. This is where our shadows are, so you can see our frog's basically glowing right now because of how much subsurface scattering is happening, so we know we need to adjust the subsurface. Direct specular, we have no spec, which a frog should have spec, so we know we need to fix that. This should kind of feel a little bit like a gummy bear, but I'd say it's glowing a bit too much. And then this we should really only feel in the smallest areas. This is how the light shines through or shows through our character. So we have some information now that we can make some adjustments with. So based on what I'm seeing, and we can leave this rendering if we want, I'd go to that body material on that layer 1, and I'd start, let's say, adding some spec. So I'm going to enable, turn my gain to 1. A little goes a long way here. So we want these both to 0, and we only care about value. So we're going to put our value to, let's say, 0.1. We're going to put our edge color to, let's say, 0.2. And our roughness, a frog's probably somewhat looks wet, so let's put this to like 0.4. So he's not going to be really super shiny, but he's going to be a little bit shiny. And then under subsurface, this value we start bringing lower. So let's go to 5. I like halving these values till I go too far, and then I work in between the two extremes of too low and too high. And we'll put this at 5 as well. So from here, we fixed all the kind of things we didn't like about these layers. I'm going to hit escape to cancel it. I'm going to hit R to render it. And when it kicks off, I'm going to open up these layers. And then I'll compare each one. So like my single scatter here, so now we're not seeing everything on the frog, right? So this is probably getting a little bit closer to what we want with single scatter. You know, if we start comparing these two, it's not glowing quite as much. The subsurface still feels like it's glowing, but not as much as before. And then direct specular, now we're actually getting some direct spec, so that's good. And then shadow, we're actually starting to get some shadows on the arms because he's not glowing as much, right? So if we don't have shadow and we don't have highlight, we can't observe our form. So this is gonna probably be a little bit better of a render, which I think it is compared to this guy up here. We're definitely getting more form by adding those highlights. And now we start making some choices. So I'd say we have too much reflectivity to it. so we can drop those values down, right? So we don't have these super strong highlights. I'd say it's a little too wet looking all over. So this is a map that we'd paint later on, but we want to find our mid-range before we start painting any maps. And we're still glowing too much. So with all those decisions that we just made by looking at the layers and looking at the final image, we're going to go back through here. And our mean free path, let's go to 2.5. Good. Let's go back up to here, and let's half this value, so 0.05. And we'll do edge color to 0.1. And then our roughness, let's go to 0.6. Cool, so I'm happy with those values. I think we might be no, I don't think we're extreme on the light. If we're looking at this rim, that's about what I'd want out of a rim light. So let's leave the light exposure alone. I'm going to hit escape to cancel that render. I'm going to hit R to kick off the new render. Cool. I'll open this up, and I'll start comparing all these to the ones before. So now we're really starting to get what I'd expect out of that single scatter. So we're starting to get some really dark areas, so probably going to take this even lower. So with the single scatter, you only want it to show up in the thinnest areas. Subsurface, we're still glowy with the subsurface, so we're going to take that down. Direct spec, I like how the highlight opened up from changing the roughness, and it's dialed back a bit. It's still a little bright on the bottom of these feet, so we may even bring that down slightly more. And the shadows are probably feeling, yep, even a little better than before. And let's look at it as a full render. So I like the direction the skin's going. Maybe it's a little bit too like toxic glowing green, so maybe we want to change that with our next round of changes. So I'm just going to walk you through one more round of changes, and then we'll kind of wrap this all up. But if you follow this video, you'll be good for this week's turn-in. So I'm going to go through my distances and turn these to 1.25. Have them anymore because I think we're close to what we want. So I'm going to go 0.035, and on this guy I'm going to go 0.07, 07, not 7. I think maybe we went a little too far with that, so I want a little bit shinier. So now this is where we're slowly starting to dial things in. I think that's everything we kind of talked about with wanting to change. So I'm going to hit escape here to cancel it. I'm going to hit R to kick off another render while I'm in that render window, and we'll wait for it. Now we can just kind of go back through these, so you can see it's gotten even a little bit darker. We're starting to get almost some black areas, which is good, so this value will still go lower until I see more black and just a little bit of kind of green kicking out from this. Now we're starting to see some shadowed areas, which is good. This shouldn't glow all the way through. I like the change of the direct spec. I think we're getting a better balance on the feet. We're not having no speck anywhere. We're no longer getting blown out anywhere. This is maybe still a bit hot because we're not getting gradients through some of these areas. So anywhere you're getting a pure color, like a solid color, that means that area is getting blown out, or it's called a hot spot sometimes. So we'd want to adjust that. Same with shadow, you never want kind of pure dark. So that's not too bad because we can add bounce lights later to fill that in. So I'm not too concerned with that. And then albedo is important so you can just see your color palettes working well together. So when you start bringing in like the wood colors, the leather colors, the shirt color, you can make sure all those base colors are working well together. I don't think I explained that before, the point of the albedo. Yeah, I'm liking a little bit more of that natural green. Again, it's up to you. I think I can't remember if your reference had a color palette established. If it does, you can probably just color pick right off that to get this blocked in. You may want to open the mouth a bit because the mouth overlaps. That's where we're getting this kind of garbly area in here, this messed up area. But that's pretty much it for this week's turn-in. So just watch through the whole video, watch it twice if you need to. The only thing I didn't do when I moved this geo up, you can see this transform here. We should have deleted history on that to get rid of that. So make sure everything's named. Make sure everything has a surface layered surface shader from RenderMan. If you don't have RenderMan installed, you can get that at renderman.pixar.com. And just go to Get RenderMan, try for free, non-commercial, and then just follow those steps that they walk you through so you can get that installed. Make sure all your UVs are laid out this week. There's plenty of material for laying out UVs in Maya 2018, so if you're unfamiliar with it, just you've had it enough, but if you've forgotten it, just kind of review some videos on YouTube or lynda.com to kind of get back up to speed with it. And yeah, that should help you out. That should get you through this week. Let me know if you're still concerned. Yeah, and I'll talk to you after I get to see your turn-in on Sunday.